As the Whitechapel murders began, or at least with the dawning of the knowledge that a repeat killer was loose on the streets of Whitechapel, many of the people who lived in the district began complaining about the lack of adequate policing in the East End of London. On the 3rd of September 1888, with the area reeling in shock at the murder of Mary Nichols, which had taken place on August the 31st in Bucks Row, Whitechapel, Mr. Henry T Tibats of 24 Artillery Lane wrote to the Daily News to highlight his concerns about the lack of police. I contend as an East End man having business premises within a stone's throw of Whitechapel Church that our police protection is shamefully adequate, and that the scenes that hourly and daily are enacted in this locality are a disgrace to our vaunted progress. I myself have witnessed street fights amounting almost to murder in the neighbourhood of Osborne Street, Fashion Street, etc., and never at any of these critical periods are the police to be found. Only within the last few days has a most disgraceful scene been enacted close to my own gates in Spitalfields, but then, as ever, the police were conspicuous by their absence, and such things are common occurrence. It is quite time someone spoke out plainly. I have waited long enough, hoping that some of our representatives in the parish might take the matter up, but the time has arrived when I, for one, will no longer remain quiet. I only hope that this may be the means, with your valuable assistance, of calling attention to an altogether extraordinary condition of affairs. On the 8th of September, the day on which Annie Chapman was murdered in the backyard of number 29 Hanbury Street, a reader of the Evening News, who signed himself Ratepayer, fired off an angry missive to the paper to complain about the lack of adequate policing in London. Sir, another ghastly, heart-rending and horrible murder in Whitechapel this morning. When is Sir Charles Warren, the incapable and incompetent, to be roused from his lethargy? The police are not allowed to do any duty now. They are all posted at street corners, and there they stop. The street roughs, rowdies, cutthroats and assassins well know this, and have the thoroughfares to themselves, and commit all sorts of outrages with impunity and without fear of detection or even interference. The streets outside the city boundary, even in broad daylight, are positively unsafe. You may walk from Goswell Road to the top of Stamford Hill any day you like and never meet a policeman. The police never find anything out. They are not allowed. What do we want with a military man at the head of the police, especially a psalm-smiting, gospel-grinding and Bible-punching specimen like Sir Charles Warren? As the press coverage of the murders increased in the aftermath of Annie Chapman's murder, newspapers began taking a closer look at the district in which the atrocities were occurring, and what they reported was, to say the least, disturbing. On Saturday, the 15th of September, the Edinburgh Evening News published the following article, which showed just how bad things were getting in Whitechapel, irrespective of the murders that were taking place there. The people of Whitechapel, the respectable people of Whitechapel that is, want more policemen, and not without reason. Whenever you inquire, you get some fresh story of robbery and outrages committed, often in broad daylight. A Star reporter yesterday morning made some inquiries in the streets lying between the scenes of the last two murders, and found that since the Bucks Row crime, hardly a day has passed that has been unmarked by some brutal assault and robbery by a gang. Several such offences have happened during the last few days, whilst the place has been swarming with plain-clothes policemen. Last Saturday afternoon in the Whitechapel Road, while the murder excitement was at its height, a man was attacked and robbed of his watch. On Wednesday, a gentleman was robbed in Hanbury Street at 11 o'clock in the morning. In the afternoon of the same day, in the same street, another old gentleman was hustled and robbed of part of his watch chain, luckily not losing his watch. In Chicksand Street, not yards away, an old man of 70 was robbed and ill-used in a similar manner. In Baker's Row, within a stone's throw, a feeble old man was badly beaten with the stick he was walking with. And at night, at 10 o'clock in Baker's Row, at the corner of Hanbury Street, A young man was the victim of a brutal onslaught because he looked respectable and worth robbing. Yesterday morning, a baker named Barnett, who keeps a shop in Hanbury Street, was robbed of £19 from a till in which a key had been left only for a few seconds. He followed the thief but couldn't catch him, and a policeman was nowhere to be seen. Whitechapel always has been a rough and not particularly honest neighbourhood. Every respectable inhabitant seems to have been robbed at one time or other. But the unanimous testimony is that every day Whitechapel is getting worse. It has come to such a pass that a tobacconist in Baker's Row, who recently has been a frequent victim, has had to screw everything he possibly can to the counter. Newspaper articles such as this, along with the almost incessant reporting on the Whitechapel murders, helped create a picture of the East End of London in the minds of the reading public throughout the country as a hotbed of wickedness in which no honest or respectable person could ever be safe. This image of ever-present lurking evil was, of course, exacerbated by the escapades of the unknown miscreant who was carrying out the awful atrocities, and this, coupled with the depictions of the vice and degradation that were coming out of the inquests into the deaths of his victims, helped foster a perception of Whitechapel as a lawless hinterland, the corrupting influence of which was as dangerous to society at large as the murderer was to his victims. As the Reverend Samuel Barnett, the vicar of St Jude's on Commercial Street, put it in a letter to the Times, which was published on the 19th of September, Whitechapel horrors will not be in vain if, at last, the public conscience awakes to consider the life which these horrors reveal. The murders were, it may almost be said, bound to come. Generation could not follow generation in lawless intercourse. Children could not be familiarized with scenes of degradation. Community in crime could not be the bond of society, and the end of all be peace. Some of us who, during many years, have known the life of our neighbours do not think the murders to be the worst fact in our experience, and published evidence now gives material for forming a picture of daily or nightly life such as no one has imagined. The Times, responding to his letter, no doubt reflected the feelings of many of its readers when it opined, "We seem to have listlessly acquiesced in the existence of these kitchen middens of humanity, to have treated them as though society must keep a receptacle for the collection of its waste material. We have long ago learned that neglected organic refuse breeds pestilence. Can we doubt that neglected human refuse as inevitably breeds crime, and that crime reproduces itself like germs in an infected atmosphere, and becomes at each successive cultivation more deadly, more bestial, and more absolutely unrestrained?" And so the people of Victorian Britain came to view the killer as an inevitable outgrowth of the lawless and heathen enclave in which his crimes were occurring, and in consequence he impacted on society in a way in which no murderer had ever done up to that point, and in which no murderer would ever do again. The ghoul-like creature who stalks through the streets of London, the Star warned its readers, is simply drunk with blood, and he will have more.